Welcome to Art 101, brought to you by Central Oregon Community College. This is video lecture number 1 of 2 for the week of April 27th to 30th. And today we look at Chapter 6 of the online textbook, Texture, Time, and Motion. If you haven't completed this assignment on Pearson, please do so before proceeding with the video. First, differentiating between actual texture and visual texture. Then 2 important vocabulary words, temporal and static. And we'll look at a number of examples of kinetic art. While it may seem extremely academic, I'd like you to be very clear when you identify the formal element of texture. Quite simply, when referring to a two-dimensional illusion of texture, this is visual texture. Optically, we can be convinced of texture, but there is no tactile experience. If you stroke the old man's beard, you'll be disappointed by the feel of smooth paper. Whereas the absurd large-scale beards created by Robert Therian demonstrate actual texture, you can imagine, in pre-COVID times, running your fingers through these objects. Onward, let's move on to 2 very important terms, spatial or static, and temporal. Paintings, photos, prints, and some sculptures are considered spatial or static art forms. They occupy space, but they do not necessarily occupy time. You can take in the entirety of visual information contained in a painting, for example, with a single glance. Music and literature are clear examples of temporal art forms, as they require the passage of time to be fully experienced. Shown here is a noteworthy exception. This installation of Claude Monet's water lilies in a room built especially for this display can be considered temporal, since it's impossible to view the entire set of images at once. They surround the viewer. There are other exceptions, too. Often there's an implied narrative in a spatial work of art that evokes the passage of time as we construct the narrative in our thoughts. The well-known story of David and Goliath has been represented in numerous works of art. Here are 2 examples, one in which the implied motion of David slinging a stone, energy bound up and ready to be released, creates a narrative effect, causing us to speculate beyond the frame of what is seen. The other David by Michelangelo is shown in repose, thus a far more static representation. Unlike paintings, which are viewed frontally and therefore can be referred to as static artworks, it can be argued that 3-dimensional sculptures are, in general, temporal, as they are meant to be viewed in the round. In other words, you cannot view a sculpture in its entirety from a single fixed point of view. Some sculptures, additionally, evoke narratives, like the examples here. You can imagine a before, during, and after narrative in each instance. Whether abstract or representational, these images call on our imaginations to consider the past, present, and future events. Let's talk now about truly temporal visual art forms. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the moving image joined music and literature as a temporal form. It is for this reason I want to make a special point about how you approach certain works as students of visual art. When you come across an example of time-based art, whether it's documentation of a temporal work, or, as in the previous example of Janine Antoni's touch piece, the artwork itself is actually a video. I hope you'll take it upon yourself to seek out a temporal version of the work to look at. Put in a different way, I hope you can see how inadequate a still image is for gaining an understanding of a time-based artwork. Here's a case in point. The online text presented you with a still image of Philip K. Smith's Lucid Stead. The still image does very little to reveal the essence of this work, which can only be experienced temporally.
Lucid Stead is really a collaboration with a 70-year-old existing homesteader shack that was here on my property in Joshua Tree, California. The wood siding that you see is the original wood siding. The dimensions of the openings have not been changed. cracks and the broken wood and the nails that are within it are all part of that existing structure that you might say has taken 70 years to get to this point today. By day, it's a mirrored structure that reflects the desert. By night, it's a projected light installation where LED lighting creates fields of color that are slowly moving through the color wheel. This project is about tapping into the desert, into the pace of change, and is about responding to the quiet of the place. And ultimately, in that quiet, the project begins to unfold. It's really about kind of four ideas, and that is light and shadow, reflected light, projected light, and change. The light and shadow is about the interaction with the sun, and that the project varies dramatically from sunrise to 9 a.m. to noon to 3 to dusk and into the evening. At dusk, there's the reflection of the sunset within it, while the windows and the doorway are slowly shifting through the color wheel. The reflected light is within the mirrors itself, reflecting the desert around it, using the desert really as material and medium and placing it onto the side of the shack. The projected light is at night, and it sort of comes from the inside out, where lights on the interior begin to reveal the structure of the shack, the 2x4s, the diagonal bracing, sort of as lit lines wrapping around the structure. Yet within it are the four windows in the doorway as pure fields of color that are set at just the right pace of change that you're not entirely aware that they're changing. You might see red, blue, and yellow, look down, move 10 feet, and realize that now it's purple, orange, and green. So the project really is about slowing down and coming to the desert to tap into that pace of change, and about stopping and being quiet so that you can truly see and listen.
In the 20th and 21st centuries, a number of temporal visual art forms emerged. Among these, video, installation art, body art, performance art, and others. One temporal visual art form has been around for many centuries, however, kinetic art, or kinetic sculpture.
うわうわうわうわうわうわこれですかすげえうわこれ実際に動くんですか動きますねは
あからくりし久重が精魂傾けた弓引き童子200年前の作品です一本一本丹念に作られた矢美しくまとった着物柔らかで洗練された表情
ゼンマイなんですけど、これを引くと。わわわわわわ。今。
ああ、すごい。首が動いてる。
ちょっと押しました。もう一回。
顔の動きも完璧じゃないですか。
文楽の人形を思わせる細やかな動き。江戸からくりし最高の技をとくとご覧あれ。人形の動きを決めるのは11本ある操り糸。そのうち顔の動きには半分以上の6本。これで実に自然で細やかな表情を生み出しているのです。チャーコビ人形でも使われていたカム。なんとカムが7枚も。ゼンマイによりカムが動き、下の板に連動。操り糸を動かし、新たな人形の動きを生み出す仕掛け。さらに別のカムは右手の縦の動きと連動。こうして立体的な動きが作り出されているのです。
Here he goes. Yay! How about that?
That something from the late 1700s could captivate today's youth seems as miraculous as the device itself. This elaborate wind-up machine called an automaton, which writes and draws, is in many ways a mystery, even centuries later.
The more you watch it, the more you realize how little you actually know. We're winding the spring up.
Just like you'd wind up a clock.
Yeah.
This remarkable boy machine could be moved by a series of levers, guided by precisely carved grooves in brass discs called cams. Not only could it draw 4 different pictures, including a Chinese temple and a ship, but it could write poems, 1 in English, 2 in French, solving a mystery.
It wrote out, essentially, this device was created by Maillard. And that told us who the maker was, and from there we could find out the history of the device.
The Japanese karakuri tradition and the Western automatons demonstrated what could be achieved long before electric motors. Jean Tinguely was a Swiss artist known for his kinetic sculptures in the industrialized world during the period of modernism.
C'est une très belle chose qui est en train de se produire pour moi. Je construis mon chef-d'œuvre.
Je suis Jean Tinguely et je fais des machines qui ne servent à rien.
Est-ce que vous êtes technicien?
Non, je suis poète.
Hat auch einmal ein kleines Objekt nach Bern in die Weihnachtsausstellung geschickt.
Vous appelez ça une sculpture?
Die haben gemeint, das sei ein fauler Witz und richtig fortgeht.
Täglich. Köln, Wilhelmsbrunnen, Barcelona, Wilhelmsbrunnen, Los Angeles, Wilhelmsbrunnen.
Et là-dessus, ils ouvrent une valise, flac, comme dans les films.
des billets de banque.
Vous êtes suisse?
Oui,
Pourquoi ne restez-vous pas en Suisse? Vous n'aimez pas alors?
si beaucoup,
Alors,
mais je préfère l'éviter.
They were fundamentalists of art.
Tingale and Nikki de Saint-Phal were dispersing the homemade plastic bombs.
Also, the concept of family was a bourgeois concept that had to be destroyed.
The world began to blow up.
Quand vous regardez vos machines, est-ce que vous n'avez pas peur?
non, moi j'en ai marre. J'aimerais changer de métier. À vrai dire, je voudrais être violoniste si je pouvais.
Tiens, j'ai fait cet objet, le ballet des pauvres, j'ai fait ça à Stockholm.
I call this Poor People's Ballet. I made it in Stockholm in 1961. This is probably a reaction to what we call the consumer society. I felt we have so much excess, wealth, objects. We buy so much. I tried to send this up by jiggling objects together in a kind of hysterical way. It makes what used to be consumer goods look ridiculous. I just wanted to make fun of it all. Basically, I can't stop myself. I've launched myself into something at great speed, a form of creation I can't control. And sometimes it gets the better of me, and that's marvelous. That's one of my qualities, being able to make mistakes. I would like to make something like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, a machine that walks through the exhibition and fascinates children. I already made the first one, the Klamauk, after a lot of sweat and tears. It has cymbals and lots of percussion instruments. I don't think it works very well, but that doesn't matter. I'm just experimenting. Now I'm having a second go, and I'm calling it Radal or Cravis, and I would like the machine to be so good that children will be rooted to the spot, watching it. For me, money is not important. I have to stay honest. I have to be a dreamer. I have to transmit ideas, freeze the moment, try to communicate an ambiance. This is a vision of our super-abundant society, our industrial society. Russia is going to have this too. It's a kind of fascism, a bundling up, a concentration, an idea, and the idea is eat, buy, buy, buy. And Russia has to learn about this. There's been a good response to my work from the public. It's put pressure on me to work faster. I want to stay on course, keep things fresh and poetic, but not to be overwhelmed by my own success. Success is the enemy. You have to know how to use the energy these successes release to really do something good. I don't just want to do the same thing over again for the sake of having done something. I want to surpass myself.
Nikki de St. Phal was Tinkley's partner and artistic collaborator, with numerous large-scale, colorful artworks of her own. Talk about audience participation. For She, a Cathedral, viewers entered through a very intimate portal. The interior space included, among other things, music rooms, a cinema, an aquarium, and a milk bar in one breast. Centuries after the Japanese archer with bow and arrow, Momoyo Torimitsu unleashed her own kinetic sculpture on the city streets. This work includes a performance by Torimitsu, dressed in a nurse's uniform. The crawling businessman is a reference to the proverbial salaryman in Japanese culture, the head of a family who spends more time working at a company than at home. Torimitsu stands by to change his conveniently located battery so that the man can keep crawling along. Here's another iteration of the project in which hundreds of businessmen crawl on a corporate battlefield. And one more in which Torimitsu takes a global perspective. Far from the hustle and bustle of the city, another artist creates his own new kinetic life forms.
I would like to tell you about a project which has started about 16 years ago, and it's about making new forms of life. And these are made of this kind of tube, electricity tube, we call it in Holland. And we can start a film about that, and we can see a little bit backwards in time.
Eventually, these beasts are going to live in herds on the beaches. Theo Jansen is working hard on this evolution.
I want to put these forms of life on the beaches, and they should survive over there on their own in the future, learning to live on their own, and it will take a couple of more years to let them walk on their own.
The mechanical beasts will not get their energy from food, but from the wind. The wind will move feathers on their back, which will drive their feet.
The beast walks sideways on the wet sand of the beach with its nose pointed into the wind. As soon as it walks into either the rolling surf or the dry sand, it stops and walks in the opposite direction. Evolution has generated many species. This is the Animaris currens ventosa.
This is a herd, and it is built according to genetical code, and this is a sort of race, and every animal is different, and the winning code will multiply. This is a wave going from left to right. You can see this one. And now it goes from, yes, now it goes from left to right. And this is a new generation, a new family, which is able to store the wind. So the wings pump up air in lemonade bottles, which are on top of the and they can use that energy in case the wind falls away and the tide is coming up, and they still have a little bit of energy to reach the dunes and save their lives, because they are drowned very easily. I could show you this animal. Thank you. So the proportion of the tubes in this animal is very important for the walking. There are 11 numbers, which are called the 11 holy numbers. These are the distances of the tubes, which makes it walk that way. In fact, it's a new invention of the wheel. It works the same as a wheel. The axis of a wheel is staying on the same level, and this hip is staying on the same level as well. In fact, it is better than a wheel, because when you try to drive with your bicycle on the beach, you will notice it's going very, very hard to do. And the feet just step over the sand, and the wheel has to touch every piece of the ground in between. So 5,000 years after the invention of the wheel, we have a new wheel. And I will show you in the next video. Can you start it, please? The very heavy loads can be moved. There's a guy pushing there behind, but can also walk on the wind very well. It's 3.2 tons. And this is working on the stored wind in the bottles. Here's a feeler when it can feel obstacles and turn around. And next shot you see it's going to the other way.
We end today with American artist Arthur Ganson, whose masterfully crafted kinetic projects tend to be good-humored, reflections perhaps on the knack that we humans have for complicating or automating simple and sometimes ridiculous actions. In the next piece, I feel like Ganson might be acknowledging the Japanese karakuri, archer with bow and arrows, the granddaddy of kinetic sculptures.